Indian entrepreneurs are world class. If the gradient of these entrepreneurial businesses is growing, let's say 15 degrees in the past 10 years, in the next 10 years, it's a 60-degree gradient. Every single piece of the country is going to be touched by entrepreneurs and new business models and products.
When I look at Chirate's portfolio, each company is so different from the other. I look at an Ather Biomedical, and then I look at a FirstCry, and I look at a Policy Bazaar.
Let's call it the Chiratae ideology. Phase 1, we had a lot of e-commerce companies. Phase 2, we added fintech and health tech. Phase 3, we added deep tech and technology. If you view them all together, you will find a big diversity. But if you view them in specific years, you'll see there's a commonality there. The entrepreneurs are coming up with new ideas. The VC has to change every day.
Let's say a 20-year-old founder is watching this. He has a little bit of shiny object syndrome, seeing massive opportunities for Delta in various sectors. What advice would you give him?
He should just do only one thing.
So before we officially start off, we were having a little side chat, and you told me that Chiratae is more focused on exits, because everyone's talking about deployment, everyone's talking about the Indian asymmetry and the bull case, right? Talk to me a little bit about the exits, and there is the critics' view, obviously, that there's a disconnect between the private market and the public market with respect to exits. So what are your views on this entire?
No, I think it's very simple, and I'll perhaps give you a little bit of background.
Sure.
As investors, we back stellar founders. Very simple. Okay.
Yeah.
However, it is important to recognize who our client is. Our client is the investor, and we have a fiduciary responsibility to return capital with performance. And 2010, I was with one of our investors. We were both in Japan. We were both in Tokyo. And he was raising capital for his fund of fund.
Okay.
And I was raising capital for us.
Okay.
So both of us pitched, and we came out. We had some time, and we were walking on the street, and he said, "You know what? I can't come into your second fund." I said, "Really?" His name is Bruno, by the way. And I said, "Why?" He said, "Whenever I visit your firm, you're only talking about investing, okay? And you never talk about exits. You also have to build a firm, by the way.
Yeah.
So, and if you don't talk about exits, how will I get my returns?" That was a very big shock to me. But it was very logical reasoning. And Bruno was very casual about it. Not that he didn't want to fund us, but I think he was passing on a message. Now, I understood that. We had another discussion after that. We parted ways, and we came back, discussed it, and we said, look, we have to change the culture of the firm. And the culture of the firm has to think about exits. And it was 2010. So that was 3 years after we raised our first fund. It was 3 years before we were about to raise our second fund. So we came back. How did we change the culture? We said, look, instead of discussing on our weekly meetings investing, to start with, we discuss exits. And the whole team came back and said, we don't have any exits. It's only been 3 years or 4 years. So I said, no, let's talk about exits. Let's just force ourselves to think about exits. And that's how we started. And then over a period of time, partially hindsight, partially foresight, we sort of put together a set of principles. One of them is we must exit every year. We must give return every year. Obviously, since we have many funds, 7 funds under our belt,
right,
it is possible to think like that. If a VC has only one fund, it's not possible to think like that. So we said, okay, let's do that. So it's been now 14 years. We've returned almost $1 billion, but we've returned capital every year for 14 years now. So our journey has been return capital every year, return capital either through IPO or through secondary or through M&A.
Yeah.
Now we are at stage, we must execute all 3 in 1 year. Predictability has to increase. And then we also said, let's do it at scale. So effectively, if you have many funds under your belt, you can't be returning the same amount of money which you returned last year. So we are now scaling up our exits. And whatever we returned, which is almost $1 billion in a year, or just short of $1 billion, I think we have to increase our scale by 50% at least now. So we have already put that structure together to make sure that our exits are higher than what they were last year. So that's how we said we should do exits.
So
And trust me, it's the toughest job in the VC business.
Exits.
It's the toughest job. It's the non-sexiest jobs in the VC business, and it takes a lot of effort to talk to the founder, to talk to your board members, and that's I think what we are fairly well entrenched in our journey on that.
Got it. So I have to ask you, but does a mental model like that, hey, we have to exit every year, does that not put a shot clock on IRR almost? Like,
it does, but it is to be done with consulting with your LPs. That's customer, and obviously it has to also be told to the founder as such that look, exit is not a bad thing. But India, when we started, was unpredictable in returns. And so my LPs were saying, look, India is known for investments, but not known for exits, right? So can you prove me you know how to exit?
Okay.
So even in our second fund, as a VC, we took a little bit of money and put it into a late stage company pre-IPO and took 2 or 3 companies public. Because my LPs were saying, you have to prove that you know how to exit. So these are dynamics which are very important because India had never returned so much of capital of exits. Now a lot of VCs have returned exits.
Sure.
But we had to prove, because we were one of the first few VCs in the country, and we had to prove to our LPs so that they can fund us again.
Yeah. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the founder aspect of it. You funded FirstCry, Myntra, Lenskart. I have to ask you, what's the most memorable first founder meeting you've had?
Most memorable? I think literally everything was most memorable. And I'm not ducking the question.
But if you had to pick one.
But I don't think I can pick one.
Okay.
When I met Mukesh,
Yes.
it was very memorable. And I can cite 1 or 2 examples, but when I met Sneh of Miko, or the Shadul brothers from Agrostar, or Dhruv from Ather, right? Lenskart founder meeting with Piyush, amazing meeting, right? He was telling us, I am in the business of correcting myopia. And we were telling him how many eyeglasses you will sell more, right? Or Supam from FirstCry.
Yeah.
But I think, every founder meeting is exceptional.
In their own way.
In their own way. Every founder meeting. They're exceptional in humility, they're exceptional in passion, they're exceptional in what they're doing, okay? And they're exceptional in just the ambition and the whole let's get it done attitude which they have, right? So I think, and please understand, when we meet founders today, right, we are funding, the median age of founders we are funding is about 27 years old.
Yeah.
And that I think is a little bit high. We have to reduce it now. Okay? But when I met first Mukesh, as an example, I'll give you 2 examples.
Sure.
It was raining, it was a Saturday, and in Bangalore. And when I reached the office, it was in a market. And on the left-hand side was a chai shop, on the right-hand side was a vegetable shop. And the small staircase led up to the first floor where he was having his office.
Yeah.
And so I sort of squeezed through my big frame into that and went up and said, my first thought was, when I was crossing the puddles, this guy must be fairly conservative in cost management. He's a guy who was a very good entrepreneur in a vegetable market is very unique, by the way, even in today's world, right? When I went there, he came in, he said, Sudhir, I'm a little bit late. Can I just take 10 more minutes? I said, no problem. And so humble. And then, and I'm not judging, by the way, I'm just noticing, right?
Right.
Then I'm waiting for 10, 15 minutes and there is buzz in the office. There's energy in the office. There was about 30, 40 people and they're doing what they're doing. And there is extremely high degree of commitment. So what that signaled to me was a very good leader. And a large part of my mind was saying, you know what, I think I want to work with Mukesh. And then, of course, the meeting happened and so on and so forth. Right?
And this was seed?
This was the first institutional check.
Wow.
Right.
So first institutional check-in.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's very important. When I met Miko, I think my decision, right, because he had built something unique in the AI robotic humanoid space, and he was very passionate. IIT, of course, but many people are not from IIT. And in that meeting, he just said, the world is going to change with my product. Yeah. And we sort of said, you know what, this is very interesting. We'll put the first check, but there's a process which happens. And very unique in terms of how he wants to use AI and robotics. And this is 7 years back.
Yeah.
Okay. When I met the couple from KB Cole, they wanted to change the world by extracting color out of bacteria and replacing chemical colors for textiles. Aether, the upper limb prosthetics using AI robotics.
Yeah.
Very unique. He says the products are too expensive and they're too dumb, if I may say, use the word. And I think I can change the world, and here's my product overall. Supam, the Shardul brothers, you name it. I think I can name so many people. Ankit Nagori, amazing person.
So, but while, there's a different story attached with each, and probably there were different attributes that stood out about each of them, do you think there's a common denominator somewhere?
I think there is. Those are more human in nature rather than there's humility.
What are those, if I can ask?
Humility.
Okay.
Willingness to learn. I think the other thing is very simple, that they're just out to do something unique and extremely passionate. They know their business. The power of oration is very high. Okay. And they are very good leaders. Every single one of them, okay, are very good leaders. They can get teams, right? And they recognize, I'm not good at these 3 things. I need somebody who's good at these 3 things, right? If I need to grow my company, I need more people inside.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not about hoarding. It's about saying, come, let's work together. So I think there are many, many things which are there. They're exceptional leaders at a very young age.
So I think a lot of people watching this may not be fully privy to what goes behind running a $1.3 billion venture fund. And a lot of venture funds that I've seen personally and interacted with, they have these elaborate investment committees behind actually saying, yes, we believe in this founder, we believe in his conviction, we will back him, right? Talk to me a little bit about the actual investment process from the first founder meeting all the way from actually putting the check in.
Great question. We've gone through many, let's say, hoops to come where we are right now. When we started the firm in 2007, right? It was me and my co-founder, TC Meenakshi Sundaram. And a lot of that was instinct because we were doing very early stage, seed stage. Our check size was small.
Right.
I think in seed stage and a little bit in Series A, instinct plays a lot. Okay? And I keep saying to many of my colleagues that you have to play with instinct a lot. Okay? Because the product is not proven. Markets are not proven.
Yeah.
PMF is not proven. The only person you're backing is the person. Okay, so a lot of time is spent with that. Of course, and I gave you an example of Miko. I think in my head, the decision was very positive in the first meeting, which lasted for about a 90-minute.
Wow.
And then we said, okay, let's do some homework, right? And the team comes and does the homework. Of course, there's an IC, okay? And that IC can't be bureaucratic in nature. The IC has to say yes or no very fast.
Yeah.
And the IC becomes more, let's say, process-oriented as you go to Series A, then Series B, and then Series C, right? So the structure of the IC becomes more formal as you grow up the ladder. But fundamentally, the IC has to be there because you want multiple views on that.
Correct.
But seed is about taking risk.
Right.
And the risk profile has to be high.
So at seed, sir, what are you filtering for? Is it just, okay, there clearly exists a TAM and an opportunity, founder is exceptional, what else?
So exceptional founder is a given, and that happens through meetings again and again. I think the other is we look for obviously large TAM, new business model, new revenue model, new product, new technology, new go-to-market. Everything has to be new. When we started the first fund, it was or situation. Some of these are met. I think today many of these are in an and situation, which increases the risk, by the way, and increases the kind of companies which we.
How so?
No, so what happens is if you have everything new, right, the task to success is more difficult.
Yeah, fair.
It's unproven, right?
Yeah.
But that's where game changing happens. So, effectively in seed, which we typically allocate about 10% of our capital, those are risky bets because they've never climbed a mountain before. And everything is not proven. Okay? But moment you come to Series A, your PMF is right, almost. Your revenue is there, your customer base is there. You can take feedback.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think there's a difference in how VCs handle ICs. Okay? They have to accommodate risk in the IC.
This is interesting to get an insight because I feel like a lot of people are just not privy to this world. So they don't know.
And by the way, one thing, I think in our IC, what we've done from the beginning is though formal, of course there are votes, of course all that, but we've added our youngsters to the IC in the meeting. And our youngsters have half a vote.
Wow.
Very important because the whole space of everything new, right? And the entrepreneurs are 27 years old, the youngsters are actually better equipped. So to that extent, we wanted to, and in that, we didn't have VCs growing on trees.
Yeah.
And we had to train everybody. How do you train everybody? You have to make sure that the decision-making process, debates, you participate in. So all our youngsters actually sit in the IC, right? And some of the, let's say, analysts may not have a vote, but they sit in the IC.
Sir, I have to ask you this because it's been a burning question for me for so long. You know, when I look at someone like Vinod Khosla or Cyan Bannister, they've spoken about the importance of being a VC, skating where the puck is going, but also zooming out to look at the big picture, right? Because we can just get warped into trends and pattern recognition. But when I look at, say, Chirate's portfolio, each company is so different from the other. I look at an Ather Biomedical and then I look at a FirstCry and I look at a Policy Bazaar and it's just vastly different. So do you subscribe to, say, a Buffett ideology of circle of competence and I like this and I will play within this area, or is it more of a founder bet for you?
I think for every VC, it's a founder bet.
Okay.
But let's call it the Chiratae ideology.
Chiratae.
The Chiratae ideology is all these companies which you have clubbed together, they have not happened at a single point of time. Right? So, phase one, we had a lot of e-commerce companies.
Okay.
They were clubbed in phase one, which is, I think, fund one and fund two.
Yeah.
Phase two, we added fintech and health tech. Phase three, we added deep tech and technology because that's the time it started coming up.
Yeah.
Okay? So if you view them all together, you will find a big diversity. But if you view them in specific years, let's say, of vintage of our funds, you'll see there's a commonality there. And it's very important to understand. So it's very important to say, okay, why did this happen? Because the markets are rapidly changing.
Yeah.
The entrepreneurs are coming up with new ideas, right? Now, what's the role of the VC? The role of the VC is to change. The VC has to change every day and say, what am I looking for? What's going to change the industry here? Is there, as I said earlier, a new product, new technology, new business model? Is that going to be commoditized very, very fast?
Right.
Okay. In one of our companies, commoditization happened with AIs. Okay.
Right.
And now, fortunately, they're able to raise capital and they're building a new model, a new product. Okay. By the way, every company goes through a pivot. I have not seen a single company which has not gone through a pivot, right? Myntra was a customized gifting company and pivoted to fashion.
Yeah.
Okay. You will find everything. We, as a fund, have to pivot in our mind to fund new ideas.
Exactly.
And that is a constant lookout for us. So that's our model.
Change is the only constant.
Change is the only constant.
you've spoken about the MBA mold very actively, and why it's maybe not the best background to have if you're looking to get into venture. Obviously, we'll have people who maybe want to get into venture or just want to get into the institutional investment field. So, why did you come to that
No, I
conclusion?
think
Or
that
how did
was
you come
that
to it?
was a, let's say, a terminology used for somebody who's extremely knowledgeable
Right.
through education. And it, some of our best founders have dropped out of All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So I think there's no constant there. But I'd like to talk about a very, very simple conceptual framework
Right.
which applies to VCs also. And that's a learning from the entrepreneur founder.
Right.
VCs have to be built in a founder mold. Right? A founder is taking risk. We have to take risk. A founder is learning every day in the morning and pivoting. We also have to do the same thing. Right? A founder is not asking for an annual increment in salaries. Good VCs are risk takers, and they have to have economic alignment with their firm.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that today when we expand our team, we are looking at, even at a young age, a founder mindset. Okay, and the founder mindset is so critical right now, because at the end of the day, we are entrepreneurs. We are building a VC firm, or we are building a growth firm right now. And at the end of the day, there is no difference between us and an entrepreneur. So the founder mindset is very important, even when you are talking to a founder.
Yeah. So each time the macro takes a hit, for Silicon Valley and the venture world in general, the 2 and 20 gets caught in the crossfire a little bit. Do you think it misaligns incentives?
As firms get bigger AUMs, I think it will get caught in the crossfire, and that's perfectly natural.
Okay.
And so it has little to do with macro, but net, I've always seen that firms like us, performance to the LP matters, and if your performance is up to the mark, the pressure of economics is not there. Alignment has to be better, right? If I'm running at 100 rupees my firm, I actually don't need 500 rupees.
True.
Okay, which is fine. I'm okay with this, but my carry has to be aligned. So the long-term economics have to be aligned.
Is there anything different you would do to align incentives?
No, I think we have to talk to our investors all the time to align incentives and make sure, like an entrepreneur, we invest in the firm also for the future.
Right.
Right? So fees are used for not just running a firm, fees are also used to hire people laterally who have different skill sets, like any other entrepreneur does. And I want to open a new sector, I have to hire an operating partner or a VC who runs into that. We just had Sahar joining us in Delhi because we want to. Delhi is our second largest deal flow source in the country, and we didn't have
first.
First is Bangalore. Okay, and Delhi is very close. We didn't have a presence there. We have to open up offices there. We've opened up offices in Bombay, right? We have an office in Ahmedabad. So we have to invest in the firm, in the people in the firm, okay, and align the incentives as such. So like any one of our entrepreneurs, we need that capital.
Right, right. And I want to talk a little bit about red flags. So we spoke about, what stands out in a founder. What do you think is an instant red flag in terms of, yes, I don't want anything to do with this founder if I've met them just now?
It's very difficult to say and pinpoint one or two things. Very difficult because it's more instinctive.
Right.
And I think it's a two-way street. So let me be clear, right? It's a two-way street. The founder also has to realize if there's a red flag on our side. Whenever investments take place, the human angle is, you know what? I think we want to work with each other.
Yeah.
That is so crucial because at the end of the day, an entrepreneur, right? It's lonely at the top. He's building something. Salaries are not market salaries, if I may, if he was doing a job.
They're absolutely not.
They're not. Okay. So how do you build chemistry? How do you build trust?
Yeah.
Okay. That's an honest discussion. What's his vision of hiring people? What's his vision of building a firm, suppose pivots have to happen, suppose tough times happen, those are discussions which are very important. By the way, tough discussions do happen.
Yeah.
Okay? And those discussions are not just, hey, where's my return? Those discussions are, you know what, something is not working. What do we do? So my view is very simple. When we talk to founders, I'm saying, can I work with him to back him to build a great company through thick and thin? Okay? That's very, very fundamental. And that's a lot to do with the softer issues, not just the harder issues.
So what's the toughest discussion you've had to have with a founder?
It's always capital, it's always exits. And the toughest discussion, I'll tell you, is when the company is not doing well. Right? And the funds have a life, by the way. Okay?
Sure,
I wish they didn't have a life. But funds have a life. And to that extent, we funds have to move on.
Yeah.
That's when the toughest discussion takes place, when the entrepreneur says, you know what, I think I want to run this firm. I know you want to exit, okay, but I still want to run this firm. Now that is a very, very tough discussion. And I think we have to do this, VCs have to do this many times, founders also have to do this many times. And in each case, we find a solution.
Yeah.
In many cases, what happens is we invested, let's say, $100, and we are probably going to get 50 out. But it's not a blame game. It's, look, mature people sit down together and say, you know what, for us, maybe it's not working out. But I think for you, in a couple of cases, we said, look, it's okay. I think you want to run this firm is fine. And we'll please run the firm. And in many cases, we've sold the shares back at some penny.
Yeah.
You should run the firm. You are passionate about it. So we have to recognize that the pain of a company not doing well is far superior in the founder, entrepreneur, than the investor. It's far superior.
Oh, wow. Okay. Again, on a separate note, I think we were talking about this before the recording started, about why it's a very different game for a Sequoia and a Chiratae today. For people watching this, can you explain that? Can you unpack that?
No, I think global funds, India is actually a very good, let's say, playground for global and domestic funds.
Yeah.
Domestic funds are have to find their own path. As I said, we are like any other. We're like you. You're an entrepreneur. You're finding your own path every day morning. You're thinking about the business 24/7. And by the way, if you don't raise your next fund, us that is, we're dead. Right? So, and the global VC firms have different parameters, but they have set processes which we are supposed to build. And they have in some sense, they have a start on one side, which is, hey, there's a set of thesis which you're building, and you can come and do the same in a country like India, which is perfectly fine. But what did we discover? We discovered that our active company's revenue is about $3+ billion, and valuation today is about $17 billion, and about $11 billion in the seed and A round. No foreign VCs there. It's Indian capital which has funded them.
Wow.
Okay. And I can name you so many examples. Now, there's nothing bad or good about it, but I think we decided that we want to take higher risk to fund companies which have a product and a technology which actually nobody in the world has, or almost nobody in the world has. So I think both global firms in India and us, we bring different value points. But as we grow, right, they will deep dive into India and we will possibly expand out of India.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's a different challenge altogether. That different challenge is very exciting. Today, out of 3 billion, 1/3 of our revenue comes from outside the country. And not from SaaS. These are consumer companies. Lenskart is possibly operating in 10+ countries. So FirstCry is operating in Middle East very actively. Okay. Miko is operating in 20 countries right now. 85-90% of revenue comes from outside the country. Okay. It's a brand new technology. So I think many of the scaled entrepreneurs and innovative entrepreneurs have realized that once I achieve a dominant position in the country, I think our products are good. They can be taken worldwide. And you will find more and more entrepreneurs doing this now. Much more entrepreneurs. And if you take Bajaj, along with TVS, along with, I think, Hero, they have a dominant market share against the Chinese in Africa on two-wheelers. Don't be surprised if Ather starts selling a large chunk of their products.
Yeah, for sure.
The EVs and whatnot, two-wheelers are outside the country. They're good products. So we believe now our job is to help our companies, after these 3 or 4 companies have gone global, to significantly expand outside the country. And through acquisitions. And by the way, founders take the lead here. Lenskart said, I want to now correct myopia across the world.
That was the pitch.
That was the pitch. That was the pitch later, not in the beginning.
Right.
And he went and acquired Owndays in Japan. Okay. I think recently they acquired a small company in France. FirstCry acquired the baby care component of Mahindra's. And then they are now fairly dominant in Saudi and UAE. Okay. Miko didn't find something in India. As a consumer robotic company, they're dominant in US. Actually, dominant means small dominance because there's no competitor, and 20 other countries. So there are different frames of mind where a global firm will operate in India and we will operate in India and then go outside the country.
Right.
And look at us, we are a platform today, right?
Yeah.
We are a platform because we have a VC series, which is run by 2 of my colleagues, Venkatesh and Ranjit. We have a growth series, okay? And we are now, one fund is over, but now we are hiring people to run that. And we will open more businesses, if I may say, right? So a substantial part of our time, which me and my co-founder TC Meenakshi Sundaram spend, is on how to grow the business overall. Let teams run different businesses, okay? And our job is now to think how to grow the firm.
Yeah.
But then we are also operators in the trenches. We like to do that overall. And how do we do that? New business possibly we run ourselves and then hand it over to the next team.
Wow. Sir, I know you've said, we've spoken about this off camera, but a lot of founders, or well, at least it's perceived so, that a lot of founders who are backed by some of the largest VCs in the country, they come from pedigree, meaning they have a fancy education, whether that's a master's degree from IIM, IITs. Has that been a prerequisite for you when investing?
We've never put it in a mold.
Right.
We said we'll fund entrepreneurs who we think we should fund.
Right.
We've never put it in a mold.
But do you think that certainly gets you higher up in terms of preference?
Used to be, but not now.
No more? Did that change?
Because of the simple reason that innovation is happening in India. And I'll give you a very simple example. We have a company called -0.
Yeah.
It's in the autonomous driving space. And we met them in Patiala. So innovation is, and of course now they've moved to Bangalore as such. And so it's not necessary that innovation is the prerogative of a few institutions or cities. Innovation is happening in depth in the country. Of course, Jaipur actually, you see Kardekho, you see other places, and there are a few entrepreneurs who are in Jaipur. Pune is our 4th largest, let's say, investment for entrepreneurs in our portfolio today, after Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay, and Pune. We have very little in Chennai, right? We have very little in Hyderabad.
But those are ecosystems.
But those are ecosystems.
Exactly.
And each ecosystem has its own DNA.
Correct.
As such. So I think putting in a box is not right. But yes, people who are entrepreneurs, they perhaps get the education and the play and the networks in these institutions perhaps better than the others.
Right.
That is a given. And Miko is from IIT Bombay.
Yeah,
Robotics. He had the science center around him. He had professors around him, right, who said, you know what, start a company overall. So that ecosystem is very helpful, very helpful.
So you've been a big proponent of the Indian bull case in India's era, per se. I want to ask you a little bit about, let's say a 20-year-old founder is watching this today, such as myself. What advice would you give him? He has a little bit of shiny object syndrome. He's seeing massive opportunities for Delta in various sectors. Where do you think he should be building, apart from the obvious, hey, build where you have competence and expertise?
He should just do only one thing, just one.
Right.
Call me.
Call you.
That's it.
Lovely. Okay. We will drop an email as an insert here. Oh,
Yeah.
I think you might get way too many calls after
No,
this.
no,
so-
and we'll handle it. Don't worry. I think, look, Indian entrepreneurs are world class. And that has been seen in what has happened in the last 10 to 15 years. If the gradient of these entrepreneurial businesses growing was, let's say, 15 degrees in the past 10 years, in the next 10 years, it's a 60-degree gradient.
Right.
Okay? And what does that 60 mean? More entrepreneurs, more innovative entrepreneurs. Their mindset of scale is much higher than yesterday because they've seen some of the other things growing. And they can grow businesses in domestic or international. The opportunities are well known to them. The risk patterns have changed.
Right.
Entrepreneurs are willing to take more risk than what they used to, and much earlier. So, and our job is to make sure that we tap into that 60 degrees gradient. It's very, very important for us.
So you were talking about risk. So, I think of risk and I think of risk-taking ability for founders in India. And I think of Flipkart and how pivotal that was. Because at least for founders like me in my generation, that became the Docker moment, right? It was like, oh wow, we can dream. So when you met Sachin and Binny all the way from, actually that exit happening and the acquisition and whatnot, how pivotal do you think that was for the ecosystem, right? And what separated them? What was
So
special
listen,
about them?
we were not early stage investors
Right,
in
right,
Flipkart. We were later when Myntra got acquired by, but we had met obviously Binny and Bansal, and we were not fortunate to invest in the early stage there. But everything stood out.
Right.
Their risk-taking ability, their humility, their ambition, their passion, their ability to raise capital and convince investors. So they are a role model even today to many entrepreneurs, and they give time. There's no question about it.
Right.
Lenskart does a lot of Shark Tank, right? But many of these founders do personal investments.
Yes.
Which is very, very good for the simple reason that that activates the entrepreneur's ecosystem. It's not about quantum of money. It's about, I have 1 hour with, Binny or Sachin or Piyush Bansal or Supam, and they're generous enough with their time for the younger entrepreneurs. That's
Lovely.
very heartening.
You mentioned Shark Tank. So I have to ask you, what are your views on Shark Tank India and what it's doing for the next generation?
I think it's just brought entrepreneurship to the center, right? And that's very good.
But do you think somewhere it's commercialized at a level where people might have a feigned idea of how investing actually happens and how?
I think there are obviously pluses and minuses, but Shark Tank has brought entrepreneurs to the center.
Right.
It has brought role model entrepreneurs, majority of them, onto the stage, and to that extent, it has spread that message that evangelization, the gospel has been spread, okay, and it should continue to be spread.
So you've also interviewed the likes of, stalwarts, right? Mr. Narayan Murthy, the late Ratan Tata, Indra Nooyi. Is there a common mental model or framework that you've seen in their leadership that you think shaped them?
many years ago, I started a vision series.
Right.
And the idea was, if I'm meeting stalwart leaders and I'm learning from them, I must share it. And I was very lucky with Mr. Tata. He gave so much of time. Okay.
Twice, I think.
No, 3 times.
Twice.
Yeah,
Oh,
but he was on our advisory board. And I think over a 6 or 7 year period, me and my team must have met him at least 30 times overall. So I think the common thread in the leadership team is very simple. Same as entrepreneurs. They're leaders, they're tall, they can be trusted. The first thing when you meet these leaders is, you can trust me. Right? And that's very, very important. I think the biggest common theme is they build trust immediately. And that's something which we all have to learn again and again. Build trust with your people, right? A very classic example I'll give you. I was very obviously taken aback when Mr. Tata passed away. He was not ill. He was not well for a long time. But when on, I think, 28th of December last year, his birthday celebration, including the passing of memorial, was going on at NCPA. And the Tata management, obviously, there's some people who gave talks in memory, very, very, very glowing memories. But there were 2 or 3 videos played of trade union leaders, and one of them was very emotional. Right? That speaks highly. So I'm saying, at the end of the day, the learning for me for that was very simple. I can brag about exits every year, but I have to think about the entrepreneur who's going through that pain when the company is not successful. I have to be sensitive towards it, right? So, trust, ability to change rapidly, and there's a lot of stuff there. I mean, that list is so long, I don't even want to get into it. But it is, and they've climbed Everest many times in their life, not once. Entrepreneurs climb Everest many times. A pivot is climbing Everest again. Imagine in COVID what happened. Majority of the company went from whatever revenue they were to zero. That was like rebuilding a company. Imagine how stressful that was to them. Of course, it was stressful to LP investors, but it was more stressful to them because they were in the trenches.
Built from the ground up all over again.
They had to build it from the ground up all the time. So the only thing which VCs did, we did, and others did, is sit down with them and say, hey, let's do it again.
Going back to the venture piece of things, I think we spoke about this off cam as well. You look at a firm like Tiger Global, and I think they led 46 Series A, 47 Series A rounds in 2022, and since June 2023, they haven't led a single one. Do you look at that piece of information and think, okay, macro, or is it more about something, or does it invite a fundamental rethink of seed stage investing? And
any exuberance on both sides, positive and negative, invites a very detailed thought.
Okay.
Very simple. It doesn't matter who it is, right? Because the markets are changing, geopolitics is changing, economies are changing. Fortunately, India is growing, right? So again, that's a decision which Tiger took. We don't know the reasons, but fundamentally, any pause or any acceleration must have a focus by people like us and say, why did this happen? And then we move forward. There was a lot of capital available at one point of time.
Right.
Now, the capital availability in India is still there, but the pace is smaller and the check size is smaller. So I think many VCs have adjusted to make sure that capital follows successful entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who can be successful and not blindly large pools of capital. That's the India today. Capital follows absolutely brilliant entrepreneurs who are stage by stage building companies, but in a rapid manner, and not large chunks of capital at the early stage.
I also want to talk a little bit about deployment. I know it's not your favorite topic.
No,
but
it is. We have to deploy, right? But we have to deploy
to exit.
to exit.
Fair. I think a recent report by VC Circle came out, and they said that between private credit, private equity, and VC, there's about $86 billion of dry powder as of Q1 of this year. What do you think that dry powder is just, sitting on the sidelines waiting for? Because obviously there's been some discounting, there's been repricing. There is so much delta with, people talking about AGI and whatnot and agentic systems. So what do you think that capital is waiting for?
In a country like India, which is so large, right? Firms like us will always have capital waiting to be deployed, whether it is, 2x, 3x, 4x, it doesn't matter. But I think it's important to slice it and what's happening.
Okay.
If you look at the VC side of it, and in VC, I'll say, let's say seed and Series A. The seed side, okay, there's a lot of new funds which have emerged in the last 5 years. Okay, India has an AI structure, which is fantastic, and then we have, I call them the sovereign fund, or rather SIDBI and SRI and others. Indian capital, institutional, insurance, banking, family offices, and high HNIs, that is a very powerful source of capital and very highly value add. Now, if you look at most of the VCs which are there in the seed series, their component of rupee capital is very high.
Yeah.
Okay, if I just take away the global VCs and people like us also as such, actually no, we'll include ourselves for a simple reason that in every fund, more than half the capital is coming from India.
Wow.
Okay, so that's very important. And
so sorry to interrupt. Just to clarify, 1.3 billion of the total AUM, 45% now.
Cumulatively, because the first fund was only dollar, from second fund we started. But if we raise a fund right now, rupee capital is high, 50-60%.
Of total AUM, of total fund size.
Of total, each fund size.
Each fund size.
Right? So if you look at the dominance of Indian capital, its seed is pretty high. You take away the global VCs there. Okay? Then if you go to Series A, I think it's, in Series A, it's a mixed bag. Right? Firms like us and Ivy Cap and Bloom and others have raised capital from India, but they've also raised capital like us from outside the country. I think when you come to Series B and C, that's the mid-market, right? There, it's dollar capital mostly. And then when you go above, like late stage growth, there's some rupee capital there.
Right.
But it's still dollar capital which is dominant.
So, and for the Sequoias and Axels and Lightspeeds of the world, does it become easier because they sort of have this pedigree of the brand name attached to them? So it's just easier for them to raise foreign capital?
They are a global firm with global LPs.
Right.
And that's their advantage.
Do you think that gives them a huge moat?
In raising capital, yes, because their reputation and brand has been built over 30 years.
But not in terms of performance? Like
no. Performance, we should be put at par and saying, okay, who's best and which fund, right? Performance is very different. It depends on the firm. It depends on the firm in India.
Right.
And it depends on who's returned how much. All that is different. That's a country issue overall. Or that's people who are operating in the country.
At the risk of sounding provocative, does it become a thing of, do they get more leeway because they have...
See, look, I think the right way to do is India has two pools of capital at various levels. One is rupee capital, the other is dollar capital. And they are experts in dollar capital. We are experts in rupee and partially dollar capital. We have to significantly improve in dollar capital. Right?
Right.
That's number one. Number two, I think India market is changing. Why that big number is there? Because if you look at the market, and I come back to exits again, there are so many secondary funds in the market.
Yeah.
Right? Now, there used to be very simplistic, let's say, early stage, mid stage, late stage. Then came seed, early, mid stage, late stage. Then came pre-IPO funds, then came secondary funds. So the market is getting large enough for these slices to happen. Okay? you'll find that's like a new product coming in, which is why
Yeah.
a firm like us has a VC series, and we also started a growth series because we saw the opportunity. Okay, so it's very important to slice that into such ways, and that's where the capital is coming from. We had a Middle East fund coming into Lenskart for $500 million. A large part was secondary because many companies who go public, they need cap table cleanups for smaller investors to get out.
Yeah.
That's very good because the capital gets recycled.
Recycle, yeah.
Overall. So, as I said, more firms will come to India, more entrepreneurial Indian funds, GPs will happen in the country. And I do also believe that global firms who are not in India, right, have already started looking at India and coming to India. General Catalyst and Venture Highway is a very good combination, right? And you will find more capital coming in all stages, but you'll also find rupee capital is increasing.
But do you think someone like a General Catalyst will want to exercise more autonomy? Obviously, we cannot speak to firm-wise dynamics, right? But is that something that you think would happen?
Look, every firm will run the way they think
want
is
to.
best,
Right.
And I believe that we as a firm, because we are building multiple businesses, to me, like to a global firm, India is a geography. To me, Delhi is a geography.
Right.
And I must make my senior colleague there independently operating. Give him a frameworks, then he's on his own.
Right.
When you say on his own, not in a negative sense, selection, entrepreneurs, programs, value add to entrepreneurs. That's everything has to be learned. Okay, so autonomy is very important under a framework. As you get larger, you have to have autonomy. You have to have frameworks of governance. You have to have frameworks of investing. You have to have legal frameworks. You have to have portfolio management frameworks. All that frameworks, as you get larger, are important.
Right. Sir, how do you think about incubators? Not to pinpoint someone in specific, but someone like a YC, right? They get a lot of flack for saying, "Hey, those guys don't do a good job with building teams," or really giving you a flavor of entrepreneurship outside of demo day.
No, absolutely. So, sorry.
No. So I just want to know, how do you think about incubators, and how do you think about incubators in India?
Look, incubators are a critical part of the ladder, right? There is somebody who's doing excellent work with entrepreneurs who just have a business plan. It is the DNA of that firm to do this, and there'll be nuggets coming out, or have already come out. It takes time, but it's an integral part of the ecosystem. There are people who, I think India has possibly more than 200 incubators, accelerators, early stage, small micro VCs who do a lot of good job at that level. And that DNA perhaps we don't have. So they are our partners, they are our supply chain. It's very crucial for every supply chain to be excellent in their own, ecosystem. And that helps the whole ecosystem.
So do you recommend going through an incubator? Do you think
We
it's
go to
excellent
incubators
discipline?
and ask whether you have good companies, and we study them.
Could you name a few?
There's so many in the country. We're 100 unicorns, and early stage we collaborated with Nest, Your Nest, Chris Krishnan has Accelera overall. I think there are many in the country.
Lovely. So, Chiratae at this point, 1.3 billion in AUM, 8 unicorns, 4 IPOs, just an exceptional track record, as good as any I can think of. And I'm not saying this as part of flattery, but what's next for Chiratae? What do you think will be the next leg to leaving a legacy behind of this homegrown fund, which created,
So I think we are playing for the long term. It's a 5-day match, and the 5-day mean next 20 years.
Right.
We are now, our core is growing people inside and hiring lateral talent now.
Okay.
So, and that is related to all functions, but businesses also. The VC series is running, leaders are there, and the growth series We are now hiring people. We'll open new businesses literally every 18 months from now onwards to map that the staircase I told you about.
Right.
Okay. And so to that extent, we'll have to perform better. So a full-time exit person, Amish, joined us 3 years back. Okay. Because we had to focus on exits, and we focused on multi asset sales. Our first 2 asset sale was done in 2019, right. Then 7 assets in 2023. Okay. So I think the firm is scaling up right now. And the firm will probably have to hire people even down the line outside the country, because many of our companies are going outside the country.
Yeah.
Overall. So good stuff happening, good stuff.
On a personal note, sir, we were just talking about legacy of the firm. I want to ask, how do you want your legacy to be remembered?
We're in a fairly good position right now, but India is a large market.
Right.
India is like multiple countries.
Right.
Right. We are going to go deep into India to promote entrepreneurship. We work with partners like CII, especially Chris Gopalakrishnan, to educate family offices in India on alternative assets. Regulations are getting better. I think the government is doing enormous amount of job, which is to build this entrepreneurial India, which is new businesses overall. And whether it is defense, whether it is agriculture, whether it is consumer commerce, fintech. I think the next big sectors are going to be health and fintech.
Wow.
We will combine with AI, and the DPI exists, which is in the country.
Correct.
Right? Every single piece of the country is going to be touched by entrepreneurs and new business models and products, okay, in the next 10 years. Every single thing is going to be touched. So this is an opportunity for us. It's already seen as an opportunity for global firms to come into India, and I think it's going to get more competitive.
Right.
More capital is required. More exits are required. Founder mindset teams are required to address this. Right. And this founder mindset teams are in VCs, by the way.
Yeah.
That's very, very crucial. Who can play the long term, who can play 10 years and 15 years, because that's the life cycle of a firm, right?
So last question. By the way, what did you think of the conversation?
Loved it. And you're an entrepreneur, so I wish you all the best. Thank you for inviting me here.
Sure.
And let's do it more.
Love it. This last question would be, who else do you think would make a great guest for the show?
No, I think you're talking to Prashant. That's a great guest. He's such a stalwart.
Lovely.
Talk to him.
I will convey your salutation.
Yes.